And looking over the past year or so, we have made tremendous improvements, but we still have far to go. And I think that that farness that we need to go, how far we need to go, we'll do that together, as said in the proverb. We will go far and we'll do it together. And I want to just say I appreciate all that the mighty Army Medicine team has done and will continue to do. And I also want to say thank you and express my appreciation for those supporters and advocates that we have that are behind the scenes and in front, really advocating on our behalf. So again, thank you for that. Now, on to today's session. I tell you, we're really fortunate to have Lieutenant General MacFarland here with us to open up the discussion on multi-domain battle. And I see a full understanding of multi-domain battle as critical to our future. I see it as a function of how we can continue to operate when we are not able to do what we are used to doing, such as enjoying uncontested air superiority and conducting air medical evacuation at times of our choosing. So how do we provide support when area access is denied? Obviously, this requires us to sharpen our skills of prolonged field care. A multi-domain battle environment is not just something that affects our lethal forces. We need to understand as medical professionals, not only our skills and craft as medical professionals that we are the reason that we exist, we also need to understand how we fit into the operational environment. It's critical for us to understand that. How would we continue to operate for a sustained period of time if our network is attacked? And you all know here how much we rely on our network in this modern day medicine that we perform. Everything from IV pumps to virtual health, all those things that are very network dependent. How will we continue to continue on in those scenarios? So those are the types of challenges that I ask you to think about, that we really must think about, and how we continue to accomplish our mission. So it's my pleasure to introduce a great leader, Lieutenant General MacFarland. I know we're not supposed to say a lot about the bios, but I just want to say the Deputy Commanding General and Chief of Staff of TRADOC since April of 2017, and the fact that he's here should speak volumes to the importance that he places on what we do and what we have. And besides that, he's a fellow Iron Soldier, so it's really a pleasure to have him here. So without further ado, General MacFarland.
Thanks, Nadia. It's a great pleasure to be here. General Ham, General Swan, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the invitation. Nadia, thanks for the introduction. I just have to say I was a little surprised that I even got the invitation, and I really did. I'm not saying this as a joke. I had my staff double check to make sure they didn't have me confused with somebody else, because I do feel like I'm a little in over my head here. As a young cavalry lieutenant, one of the first things I learned from my platoon sergeant was that, even though our medical platoon was kind of filled with a lot of oddball soldiers, that I should never look down on a medic, because you never know when you find yourself looking up at one. And, my platoon sergeant had a way of really kind of crystallizing important issues so that everybody could understand it. And I was in F Troop, 3rd Cav, and we didn't have a lot of brain surgeons in that outfit, but everybody understood his point. So I kept my medic on my track as a cavalry platoon leader, even though he was kind of a pothead, parted his hair down the middle, and but I kept him with me to make sure I could get him where he needed to be when he needed to be there. And my point in telling you all this is that, our medical platoon, our medics did a lot of goofy things, but what my platoon sergeant kind of started to try to teach me at that point, and which I've learned over the years, is not to focus on what people and organizations do, focus on what they're for. And that's what I want to talk to you today about, is not necessarily what you do, but what you're for. The Army does a lot of things. We sail ships, we fly planes, we drive trucks, we run prisons, We feed people, we put on concerts, we operate radios and computer systems. We do all sorts of things, and yet we even run hospitals, as you all know. But that's not what the Army's for. And that's not what MedCom's for, not just to run hospitals. You do a lot more than that, and you do it all very well. But the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, and while it's impressive to list all the things that you do and do well, the purpose of military medicine is simple and straightforward. It's to maximize the combat power of the United States Army. You do this by keeping our soldiers healthy before the fight, by treating our wounded during the fight, and if possible, returning them to duty. And if you can't return them to duty, you give them the best possible care and try to return them to their loved ones. And that translates to greater morale in combat for our fighting forces, knowing that if there's any way on earth to save their lives, we will take care of them. And while they're deployed, we'll take care of their families. And that enhances the morale of our force. So this is an incredibly important concept, of course, in an all-volunteer force, because right now we're trying to increase our end strength. TRADOC is doing that. I think we're going to meet our target this year. Next year is going to be even more challenging. But one of those things that people know is if you're in the United States Army, you will receive world-class medical care, and so will your family. So the theme of this conference is not just appropriate, but it's timely. Although I've been in the Army for a long time, I cannot speak from personal experience about the entire century leading up to now in terms of military innovation, but I can talk to about 30 years of it. And I'll do a little bit of that, and then I'll talk to you about what we in TRADOC think the next 30 to 100 years may look like. We'll cut it off at 30. So because I am from TRADOC, I do have slides, but there will not be a test, so pencils down. Unless, of course, you count the battlefield as a test. Go to the next slide. All right, a little history lesson. As a cavalry troop commander in the Fulda Gap in the late 1980s, I had a little over 200 soldiers under my command and one medic track. And we were expected to hold off a force of about 5 times our size for up to 7 hours, or until I'd lost about a third of my combat power, whichever came first, and the smart betting was on the latter. There's no way we would have been able to do much for our wounded under those conditions, and we would have had to leave many of them behind to the mercy of the Soviets. It wasn't something that we like to think a lot about. Next slide. Most of you know forward surgical teams were established in time for Operation Desert Storm and to perform damage control surgery on combat casualties within the golden hour wherever possible. I was in the 3rd Armored Cavalry Regiment again during Desert Storm, and we were hard-pressed to leapfrog our forward surgical teams to keep pace with the movement. And you can kind of, I don't know if you can see the 3rd Cav in there, but we were on the big left hook. And our forward surgical teams only had Hueys back then. Not all of them had Blackhawks. And they were unlikely to have been able to really provide a lot of enough medical support had we encountered the kind of casualties that some were anticipating in the thousands. Fortunately, we suffered very few casualties, as we all know, so we didn't really put that system to the test except to take care of lots and lots of wounded Iraqi soldiers. Next slide. As a brigade combat team commander in Ramadi in Iraq from 2006 to 2007, my Charlie Med company was very busy. In just a 9-month period, we were there for 15, but in just 9 months in Ramadi, I suffered over 100 killed in action and 500 wounded in action. And the 500 wounded is probably a conservative estimate because of all the RTDs. But there was no golden hour medevac capability then and there. We ground evacuated our casualties out of the city, usually in a Bradley fighting vehicle, sometimes in a track, to Camp Ramadi or one of our battalion aid stations on a combat outpost, and then tried like hell to keep them alive until nightfall, when a milk run would come around and pick them up and take them to a roll 3. It was the exception, not the rule, when we were able to get a medevac bird inside of the golden hour. There were just too many casualties. You can see the upper right-hand column, the numbers are kind of small, but it gives you a sense of the massive numbers of casualties we were incurring, particularly during the surge. Next slide, please. By the time I was in Afghanistan from 2011 to 2013 as the Deputy Chief of Staff for Operations and the Deputy Commanding General for Operations for US 4A, we had, in fact, achieved that golden hour coverage wherever U.S. and coalition troops were stationed, with the Roll 2 or Roll 3 within range. At this point, our commanders began to think that that the UH-60 range ring for our medevac birds was actually the limit of their operational reach, and they would not venture beyond it without moving some medevac aircraft forward to a forward base. We've become so spoiled by this amazing capability, and that which we also provided to our Afghan partners whenever possible, that they began to expect that too. And then one of their top 2 worries as we drew down in 2012 was the loss of medical support, the other being the loss of close air support. We simply couldn't provide that kind of a blanket to all of Afghanistan as we reduced our numbers anymore. So we had to teach our commanders about the efficacy of the platinum 10 minutes instead of the golden hour. It was a hard sell. As the commanding general of the 1st Armored Division later at Fort Bliss, we were participating in a major decisive action exercise, and one of our brigade combat teams was doing a combined arms breach against a defending enemy brigade up on the high ground, and they were trying to push their way in there. And I turned to my G3 and was planning to discuss how to use our attack helicopter battalions, the 2 attack helicopter battalions in our aviation brigade, and he said, well, you really only have 1 left. And I said, well, where's the other one? He said, well, it's been mostly attrited escorting medevac helicopters up to the point of breach. And I said, well, that's a pretty good learning point here, that we all have to come to the realization that in decisive action operations, we cannot afford to use our attack aviation assets to escort our medevac birds, and we can't afford to fly our medevac birds to the point of injury. A breach lane in decisive action, in case you don't know, is about the most lethal place on a battlefield. And we cannot do that anymore. It's just beyond our capability. So again, it's back to the platinum 10 minutes. And also our combat medics, our combat lifesavers, and in fact, every soldier needs to have every possible tool that we can provide them that makes sense given their level of training and combat load to provide medical care at the point of injury. Now, where it makes sense, we certainly want to get people as quickly as possible to the right kind of care, and that's why when I was the commander of Combined Joint Task Force Operation Inherent Resolve in Iraq from 2015 to September 2016, we fought really hard to get a Roll 3 into Baghdad. We had over 5,000 American troops on the ground and no Roll 3. And we also fought to bring in additional medevac capability because we wanted to ensure that if possible, where possible, we could give them the very best. And in fact, we were able to get that Roll 3 in time for a significant mass cal episode which undoubtedly enabled us to save the lives of numerous American and coalition force troopers. But we have to be realistic about medical support as we once again transition to more conventional operations like Desert Storm, and before that, what we thought we'd encounter in the Cold War. If we have to fight tonight in Korea or against some near-peer or peer adversary anywhere in the world, we're looking at potentially thousands of casualties. In those situations, we simply can't provide the kind of medical support that we became accustomed to in Afghanistan. But we shouldn't be as sanguine about it as we were in Europe in the 1980s either. We can do better. As we transition to the future environment on a multi-domain battlefield, we have to ask ourselves if we're training our young soldiers to experience the horrific casualty rates, and do we have the capability and capacity to deal with them? And I think the answer to the first question is yes. I'm not so sure about the answer to the second question. And I'd ask you during this conference to consider that. So let's take a look at what I'm talking about. Next slide, please. Okay, many of you recall prior to 9/11, we had a doctrine known as air-land battle. It featured a deep, close, and rear battlefield. So it was a change from the old way of thinking where we were only thinking about the close fight. We recognized that the enemy could affect us throughout the depth of that battlefield. And the purpose of this was to try to attrit the enemy before they closed to the close fight, and to defeat the enemy in our rear areas to give us freedom of action and maneuver, and so that we could fight outnumbered and win. And as you look at this, you see that it was kind of tailored to a European type of a battlefield. Worked pretty well in the desert too, but it was tailored to a specific threat, and that threat was the Warsaw Pact. And we then used that doctrine to help us acquire weapons and leverage the weapons that we had. So air-land battle, the iconic air system that we used, that the Air Force provided us, was the A-10. We developed the Apache as well, and a number of our other systems like the Black Hawk. And then on the ground, the M1 tank, the Bradley fighting vehicle, MLRS, on and on. So it kind of led the whole .mil PF process. That's why the D is first in .mil PF. So that was then. This is now. Next slide, please. So what we're developing now is something called multi-domain battle, and the first thing, obviously, that jumps off the slide to you is air-land battle was black and white, and this is in color, right? So obviously, we've made some advancements. But one of the reasons it's got to be in color is because it contains another domain. The maritime domain includes the air domain, like air-land battle does, but also space. It also includes cyberspace, and what it has allowed us to do is expand our thinking about what the modern battlefield really looks like. And that battlefield, it really extends all the way back to home station, and I'll talk about that in a minute. One of the things you see on this slide is lines going back and forth between the water and the land and the air and the air and the water, and that kind of speaks to the idea of cross-domain fires, because every domain influences every other domain. And unlike air-land battle, multi-domain battle is not necessarily focused on just fighting and winning outnumbered, but winning in a complex world. Air-land battle was a sophisticated concept for its time, but it was relatively straightforward compared to multi-domain battle. And that's because the operational environment has changed significantly since then with the advent of technologies too numerous to count, but to name a few of military significance: precision-guided munitions, autonomous and semi-autonomous systems, such as UAVs, and of course cyberspace, first the internet and now the Internet of Things. The operational environment for multi-domain battle features four important concepts. One is it's contested in all domains. So when you talk about telemedicine in a multi-domain battle, maybe not. Maybe not. Lethal at the tactical, operational, and strategic levels. We will not have the luxury like we had in Desert Storm of being able to deploy from fort to port, and from port to port, and then from port to foxhole uncontested. We'll be contested every step along the way. We can be contested at home station in the cyber domain, and we are every day, really, if you think about it. It'll be lethal at the tactical, operational, strategic levels, and particularly at the tactical level, because operational strategic lethality will come down on top of our heads in the close fight. It's a complex environment. Transnational criminal organizations, violent extremist organizations, increased urbanization, megacities, over 20 million people. Seoul, Korea is 23 million people. Our army is 1 million. Just to put it in context, globally connected populations and super-empowered individuals with access to weapons of mass destruction and high technology. And challenge deterrence, anti-access area denial, A2AD, and operations below the threshold of conflict, what the Russians call the gray zone, little green men, conducting operations below the threshold that we would consider war. Cyber, information operations. Next slide. As the range of surface-to-surface missile artillery expands, there will be no secure rear area treatment facilities, overseas or at home. For example, Landstuhl is within range of Russian intermediate-range ballistic missiles today. And as we saw in the Battle of Aleppo, they're not afraid to target hospitals. We can also look at North Korea with the developments in their missile capabilities. In Korea, even basic North Korean long-range artillery systems are well within range of Seoul. As I said, 23 million people living there. There are very few areas that our adversaries and potential adversaries cannot reach. Next slide. Multi-domain battle includes the air-land battle construct of deep, close, and rear, you see in the center there in the highlighted box, but extends them to additional areas, the deep maneuver, the deep fires, and the rear area extends beyond the support area back to the operational support and the strategic support area. And we're now looking across all phases of conflict to include those pre-conflict phases, phase 0 and phase 1, which we can call the competition phase of conflict. And this is where our adversaries like to operate, using information operations, cyber operations, and unconventional warfare, little green men. Next slide, please. So as we look at this, though, you can see the compression of the threats. Now, the new battlefield is expanded, it's converged, and it's compressed. It's expanded in terms of time, phasing, as I mentioned, phases 0 and 1, domains, space, cyber, EW, information, geography, i.e. depth, and actors, proxy forces. It's converged. Technology and the political systems can come together in the competition period, that gray zone, and it's compressed in terms of time and effects. Strategic, operational, and tactical effects all compressed here. As you can see, our medical facilities, just because they have white crosses or red crosses painted on a white background, is not going to be able to protect them. They're going to be within range of numerous enemy effects, not just lethal effects, but non-lethal as well. Go to the next slide, please. So what are we going to do about this? Well, our multi-domain battle concept has a central idea, and that is to create and exploit windows of advantage by converging capabilities from multiple domains. And this will drive .mil.PF for the future. Now, I've talked a little bit about the doctrine. Some of the organizations, Multi-Domain Task Force, Security Force Assistant Brigades, our cyber, these are some of the organizations that have come online or are coming online to help us look to the future. When we talk about materiel, we try to limit it to about 7 big systems. And remember, we had the big 5 or the big 4, depending on who you talk to, back for air-land battle. Now we're talking about 7, a big 7. And overmatch and soldier performance, vertical lift, robots and autonomous systems, mission command, which includes cyber and electronic warfare, advanced protection, combat vehicles, and cross-domain fires, as we saw in that depiction of multi-domain battle. Now, as the character of war continually changes, the nature of it does not. On land, war will always remain bloody and personal, and the Army's unique medical culture stems from that reality. It's a direct result of the need to provide medical care as far forward as possible and return wounded soldiers to battle whenever possible and as quickly as possible. That's not going to change. We have to be ready for the kind of carnage you see on this slide. From the point of injury all the way back to home station, our soldiers have to be prepared to help each other and themselves for the physical and the emotional impact of massive casualties. This is a picture of a Ukrainian armor battalion that was wiped out in just minutes by a Russian artillery barrage using thermobaric weapons. The United States Army hasn't experienced that kind of catastrophic attack since the Korean conflict. We're going to have to disperse our forces to ensure their survivability against these types of attacks. And as a result, we need to enhance our organic medical suite of enablers for prolonged care forward. Contested domains will cause delayed evacuation and will require future forces to have the ability to treat and hold casualties for longer periods of time. We require enhanced medical capability at the point of injury by providing advanced trauma and resuscitation skills, and we need to ensure that our holding facilities are self-sufficient. Now, we are doing some things about that in the medical community. Next slide. Mystic and TC3X are great examples of preparing our medics and our combat lifesavers for those types of encounters on the battlefield. We have 21 Mystics today. At the next capability development document for the Mystic, it is being rewritten right now, and strong consideration is being given to expanding the use of its capabilities to an even greater portion of the operating and generating forces. The Tactical Combat Casualty Care Exportable, the TC3X, addresses warfighting challenges to enhance realistic training and improve soldier, leader, and team performance. It enables individual soldiers to improve human performance on life-saving tasks with realistic trainers and enables commanders to build confidence in their units as well as readiness. We're changing the forward surgical team to the forward resuscitative surgery team to provide damage control resuscitation and damage control surgery to stabilize non-transportable patients following surgery and allow for Medevac to the next role of care when available. FRSTs have the capability of splitting into smaller surgical elements, making them smaller targets, and they can provide support at 2 geographically dispersed locations for short durations for up to 30 casualties. The Holistic Aviation Assessment Task Force is currently an ongoing study. And among other things, what we're looking at is a detailed sufficiency analysis for Medevac, ground, and air to determine aircraft fleet requirements and component mix in the future. We're also reorganizing our combat support hospitals into more modular field hospitals to allow them to disperse and, as necessary, grow according to the scale of the fight. So are these changes enough? Are there other innovations that are out there that we can use to mitigate these challenges? I don't know. What I do know is this, that medical care is not just your business, it's the business of every commander and every senior leader in the Army. As a platoon leader, I carried my medic with me. As a Corps commander, I spent time and effort ensuring we had the necessary Medevac and hospital support for our operations. And as we look to the future, we need to ensure that massive casualties don't take us by surprise and cause us to break faith with our soldiers. Next slide. So I'll end pretty much where I started, with a soldier looking up at a medic, with an assurance that our soldiers know that no matter what, the people in this room and those that you represent have their backs. America entrusts her sons and daughters to the United States Army because they know that despite the risks that being a soldier entails, that they will receive the fastest and best medical care in the world. TRADOC stands ready to help you with your mission in any way that we can, and I just want to thank all of you for inviting me to this important symposium, and thank you personally for all that you've done, not only for me and my family, but all of our soldiers, particularly those that serve with me in harm's way, and for our Army families. God bless all of you. Thank you. That was not in the threat brief. Okay, all right. Oh, that's what you were walking around with. All righty, fire away. Well, I got it right here. Now, one of the things I'll just say as I came down from my hospital room, my room upstairs, I lost my reading glasses, so I'm trying to read this. Regarding multi-domain battle, do you envision, really any glasses will do. I'm like, pretty low prescription. These aren't like Coke bottle glasses. Oh, okay, that's good. All right, thanks. How do I look? Great, yeah. All right, okay, I might keep these. Regarding multi-domain battle, do you envision any host nation support, medical or otherwise, to enhance strategic responsiveness? Absolutely, but we have to keep in mind that our host nations will be stressed by all sorts of different domain actors, and you know, one of the things that we have to understand is that in Eastern Europe, for example, those countries are dependent upon Russia for their energy. And then the other thing that we have to keep in mind is they're going to have plenty of casualties of their own to deal with. And if they can take care of their own casualties and not burden our medical systems with their casualties, that'll be a pretty good start. You know, if you're talking about the city of Seoul, Korea, being evacuated, 23 million people trying to get out of the range of North Korean artillery, and all that that might entail for medical support, it's hard to imagine their medical system keeping up with that, let alone helping us. Okay, this person has better handwriting, so that's good. What role do you see for the Army medicine and Army medical research in preparing soldiers physically, cognitively, and psychologically for multi-domain battle? Well, as you saw, that the TC-3X is a pretty realistic trainer, and I think those types of, and the Mystics, those types of simulations, not just for our medics, but for all of our soldiers and combat lifesavers, are going to be important in helping our soldiers brace themselves for impact. The other thing is that we have to, in our training exercises at the training centers and elsewhere, reinforce to our soldiers that they are going to be on their own, that those 9-line Medevac are not going to be answered every time, and they're going to have to take care of each other and themselves. Okay. This is a long one. Okay. Point of clarification. Did you say that attack helicopters should not be used to escort or protect Medevac helicopters? It's MET-TC dependent, right? Those attack helicopters are an important weapon system for a division and corps commander, and if we pair them up with Medevac helicopters, we're going to run out of them pretty fast. And what we need to go from in our aviation community is fighting as ones and twos back to fighting as platoons, companies, and battalions. If we're going to achieve a convergence of effects in a window of opportunity, this is what multi-domain battle is all about. Our doctrine is we create windows of advantage by combining effects from multiple domains at a decisive point. And one of those effects is from the air, and rotary wing aviation plays an important role in that. And if we are escorting Medevac helicopters around, remember what I said about air defense, anti-access, and aerial denial. That our helicopters are not going to be very survivable in large parts of the battlefield. And if we just send them out there in ones and twos, they're not going to come back. So yeah, I did say that, and I meant it. Then the writer goes on to say, my experience in Afghanistan has taught me that this could be catastrophic. Well, it would have been in Afghanistan because we were not up against a peer threat. And we had to ensure that really one of the things that we were trying to do was minimize casualties. In a decisive action fight, really, mission comes first. We have to defeat the enemy. That's how you minimize casualties, is by defeating the enemy. I was a sole provider in a remote combat outpost, and there were 55 of us, and we were attacked by 5,000. Okay. A grenade seriously injured 9, 2 evacuate 10, and we had an attack helicopter come to support. I'm not sure Medevac helicopters could have landed safely without Apaches. Probably true. So in that case, we're going to have to rely on that platinum 10 minutes until the situation stabilizes and we can either ground or air evac. I mean, let's take a look at how many Medevac helicopters there are in a combat aviation brigade. There's 10 or 12. 12, right? 12. 15? Thanks. Okay, 15. Out of about 117 helicopters. Got 48 Apaches. We are right now at a significant disadvantage vis-a-vis a lot of our peer competitors when it comes to air defense systems and long-range fires. We're going to have to husband our resources. So this is really part of the process that we really need to begin here. What's it going to be like when you can't get a Medevac helicopter in? Hey, we can get a Medevac helicopter to you, we will send it, okay? But we're probably not going to escort it with Apaches, because those Apaches are going to be pretty busy fighting elsewhere. So what are we going to do? We got to have a plan. It can't be no plan. It can't be just letting somebody bleed out. Okay, what is the role of unmanned Medevac drones in the multi-domain battlefield? Well, that's a great question. You know, the Marines have a pretty good unmanned helicopter that they're experimenting with. Right now it's just for resupply purposes. It could be used for Medevac potentially too. The only problem with unmanned Medevac is, of course, there's nobody in the back, there's no paramedic providing you know, blood or anything like that. But you know, any kind of Medevac is better than no kind of Medevac, and that has the potential to provide us with some additional capability in a A2AD environment. Regarding multi-domain battle, do you envision any host nations? Oh, I've already, okay, so I've gone through all this. Okay, or maybe that's a repeat. Okay. What role do you see for Army medicine and Army medical research? Okay, got that one. Okay, so I guess I'm through. Any other questions?
I have one more, sir.
Okay. Those all started to sound familiar. While Mystic and TC3X are an opportunity to create and sustain readiness of warfighters' ability to respond to the Platinum 10 minutes, the POM cycles and budget have not reflected the same commitment. How do we ensure sustained POM funding for these capabilities, especially as their utilization increases? That is a terrific question, and I will defer to the Surgeon General on that. But it's obviously something that we will have to do. So I know that sounds a little bit harsh and dire to some of you about, you know, the ability of us to escort helicopters around and provide medevac at the point of entry. But look, when you're talking about 4 or 5 divisions engaged in decisive combat and thousands of casualties, you saw the picture of that battalion that was wiped out in 10 minutes by thermobaric weapons. We have to be realistic with our soldiers. We can't give them false hope that they're going to get medevac within a golden hour under those kind of conditions. So we have to compensate because we still owe them our very best. And that's one of the things that we hope that this conference will focus on is how do we provide them with the very best medical care possible under those kinds of conditions when we are not able to provide that kind of medical support that we experienced for those couple of golden years there in Afghanistan, but will be hard to replicate anywhere else. So, any other questions from the floor? I think I got a few more minutes here.